Yesterday, I was talking about why is America so great. I first mentioned the geographical factor that helped them to successfully evade world wars, not suffering any damage except a really tiny small part, the Pearl Harbor. Uh, and also because of that they successfully attracted and accepted lots of talents from Europe. I must emphasize this is actually a much more bigger deal than you think. Why? Because you have to see how Western Europe looked like before world wars, and in Western Europe was fabulous. uh, we all know, thanks to Renaissance and maybe the Age of Enlightenment, basically almost every single part of Western Europe was flourishing, be it in technology and science. You have the steam engine invented in United Kingdom. You have lots of scientists, rocket scientists, in Germany, and not only that, in terms of arts, literature, it was also flourishing in Western Europe. You have a lot of musicians in Germany. The famous one was Beethoven, Bach, Mozart. Oh wait, I think Mozart was from Austria, if I'm not mistaken. But Austria was also part of Western Europe. Is part of Western Europe, and you have all the artists in Italy, in France. So the density of really talented, smart people in Western Europe was so high, extremely enormously high. The density, and can you imagine? Just let's say just 5,000 of them, migrated to USA. It could make a huge difference, especially the physicists, maybe chemists, yeah, people like that. So this is actually a much bigger deal than you think. So geographical factor, but also just yesterday I mentioned that naturally America already has a abundance of natural resources. It's a huge land, and what else? Another core thing I mentioned yesterday was how great the foundation of America is, the foundation of the Constitution, the rule of law, how ingenious the forefathers of America, how ingenious they were to draft such a marvelous Constitution. Uh, it was actually a really it requires a really huge chutzpah to actually draft this kind of constitution in 17th century. You have to think that at that point of time, the zeitgeist of the world was about monarchy, was about peasantry, but the American forefathers decided to ditch all those things, decided that in order to have a really great country, you have to give enormous freedom to every single person, including the lowest people, including people at the lowest rung of a society, because they might be able to stumble upon something and invent something new. Uh, Lowest rung of society, maybe slave. Of course, I know at that point of time, America was still running the slavery concept, the system, but later on, I think not too long after the independence, you have things that you have people like Abraham Lincoln uh, who spearheaded the abolition movement and successfully abolished slavery. So I want to give extra emphasis on how important a great constitution is for a country to flourish. A constitution is like a social contract. Okay, it's like a company. It's like a company. Country is like a company. You have great policy. You have a really meritocratic system to reward people who have done great things, and you punish people who have done atrocious things. And all this is an incentive system that really reinforce the great behaviors. And after all, society is made up of people, and people, if they behave really in a well manner, things will go really well. And of course, many countries today emulated the same thing. We have freedom of speech and so on, but you must really zoom in and see how wide the freedom America has, how wide the freedom America gives its citizens. One very obvious example is the freedom of speech. You have this, if I'm not mistaken, the case is called New Yorker or New York Times versus Sullivan. So it was a case about a reporter writing some really atrocious news about a politician, and then the politician intended to sue the reporter for defamation, and then the court uh, um, the court cited the First Amendment, of course, of the U.S. Constitution, and said that not nobody, I'm not too sure about the detail, but the court actually ruled in favor of New York Times, the reporter, and said that the reporters actually have the right to report a news, no matter how negative it is, even to the level of being an insult. So it was a marvelous case that really guarantee freedom in American society. So that's all. I think pretty much that's the reason. Geographical location, some natural resources, some luck due to World War One, World War Two, and a really marvelous constitution, marvelous freedom given to the citizens, things like that. That's all. Of course, some more delusional people, they will invent more theory. They will say, oh, because of Americans exploiting the native Indians. But I think when the English first settled in America, there weren't much things invented by the native Indians to be exploited. And then other delusional people, they will invent theories that, oh, America exploited Mexico, South American countries, steal their resources. I think those are quite trivial, quite trifling, not so important. And I don't know. There are other conspiracy theories about America controlling, exploiting United Nations, using it as a tool to an engine to exploit other rivals in Western Europe, Soviet. I think those are not so important. So. Uh, uh, yeah, I think the whole thing is very simple. You have really great foundation. You give enormous freedom at the risk of people. The biggest problem of America giving this kind of constitution and absolute extreme freedom to people is that you will risk people doing nonsense and stupid things. So, for example, you can see in America almost every single day on the news there will be people protesting somewhere, and even the repercussion manifested last year due to the maximum freedom America always have. Last year, people refused to wear masks and refused to vaccinate. They just kept protesting and protesting. I think 50% of the people kept protesting, and maybe this resulted in lots of deaths. Uh, yeah, this is the downside of giving too much of freedom, but this was the decision of the American forefathers. They were willing to take the risks, and they were astute enough to think that the upside generated by freedom will eventually outweigh the downside, which is actually true. That's the reason why America has all the greatest technology, entertainment, financial city. I think that's the reason. So, of course, it has it has had lots of downsides, but it also successfully develops a greatest country in the world. I still have 5 minutes. Actually, another thing I want to talk about is electricity. this moves into the realm of somewhat physics, engineering. I think because recently, not recently, in recent years, I always start. I've always been thinking about lots of things. How were they invented? And electricity is definitely one of the dominant thing in our life. We take it for granted. The moment we flip on a switch, electricity automatically reaches your devices, so we don't think too much about it. But if we use first reasoning to really think, what is electricity? Electricity is actually a pile of electrons. And what is electron? In elementary science, we learn that electron is a subatomic particle. It's a fundamental particle. Of course, it is not that fundamental anymore, especially after physicists discovered smaller things like quarks, Higgs boson particles. But nevertheless, electron is still very small. It exists in every single corner in the universe, everywhere. Currently, on my clothes, on my hands, there are electrons. But the only problem with all these electrons around us is they are too scattered. It's not condensed. It's not meaningful and useful enough to do anything. So actually generating electricity is actually harnessing electrons to be useful. So how do we do that? Then this one we have to talk about the forefathers of electricity, the father of electricity. Lots of people say the father of electricity is Benjamin Franklin, but I think the real father is Michael Faraday, one of the greatest scientists, experimentalists of all time. So Michael Faraday, if I'm not mistaken, he was an English, and in 17th or 18th century he really experimented a lot, and one day he discovered that there is a thing on earth there is a thing on earth that has and contains lots of electrons, and this thing is called magnets. What is magnet? Magnet is something something naturally occurred on Earth. The most original form, the oldest form, if I am not mistaken, is called lodestone. So it's just a piece of rock naturally occurred on Earth, and it happens to be very magnetic. It is able to attract ferromagnetic materials. But later on, of course, humans were able to figure out that you could synthesize magnets artificially. How do you do that? Because besides this lodestone, if you look at our periodic table in chemistry, we have 118 elements, and there are about 6 or 7 of them happen to be very we call it ferromagnetic materials. So things like iron, cobalt, copper, nickel. So these 6 to 7 elements, they have the really good nature. If you use an original natural magnet to magnetize them, they themselves could become a magnet. And why is it so? The details have to do with the actual electron arrangement of iron. And if you go even really deep into, if you watch Veritassim's video, the famous physics YouTuber, he would tell you that it is because of quantum mechanics, very complex things. So these 6 to 7 ferromagnetic materials. Oh wait, I'm running out of time. Again, I have the 15 minutes limit. I will continue about electricity tomorrow. See you.